and so I've been asked to sort of serve as the Master of Ceremonies. First, I would like to thank several people. Mickie Ross from the Williamson County Historical Commission. She is the director of the museum, and I believe also heads up the monument, historical marker group, and so she has provided invaluable assistance in the process of our securing the marker. This is the real hero of the marker right here. Dean Duncan did just absolute yeoman work. He spent hours researching. I did a smattering of editing, and that's why I can claim some of that, but it's mostly his work. And I think when you see the text that you'll realize he's done a magnificent job. We also have today members of the cemetery's Board of Trustees. Doyle Langenegger is there, okay, and is the president. Dean is the secretary. We also have James Davidson back there, our newest member. And Richard Rowe, Dick Rowe, is here, and I'm also on that body.
May I interrupt and say our former trustee died, and this is her husband, James Nowak.
Yes, right, exactly. Bobby was our trustee. Yes, glad to have you with us. I was supposed to speak briefly to the family history, and I will try to keep it brief, even though I'm not used to that. Most of you know the story of Nicholas Land and Elizabeth Land, 6 children, and they obviously believed in the biblical injunction to go forth and multiply, because you can see that we've got all manner of folk who are their descendants here. But I want to speak just briefly about the personal side of history as reflected in these cemeteries. As a professional historian, it's easy to get caught up in the big names and the big picture of history, but what I've tried to really plant in the hearts of my students over the years is that there's also something that we can call little history, and that is not in any way meant to be disparaging. All of us know the names of Sam Houston and Stephen Austin and William Travis and all those folks. But we also, I think, need to be aware of the names of Nicholas Land and Elizabeth Giles Land and others who came out and lived often very quiet lives, but nevertheless contributed greatly to who we are as a people and what we have as our history. And that's why the identification and the preservation and the acknowledgement of these historic cemeteries like this one is so very, very important. I tell my students, go to a cemetery and you'll walk into history, all right? Because every one of these graves represents a story, all right? It's the story of my grandmother, Lucy, whose husband died on Christmas Eve of 1918 in the flu epidemic. She was 31 years old with 5 children, the oldest of which was 12 and the youngest of which was a baby in arms. And had she lived for another 8 months, she would have been a widow for 50 years. That's the story here. It's the story of a young man, Eugene Lewis, who drowned, and the efforts that his brother had made to sustain him. And that's what the real history of Texas and the real history of Williamson County is about. So we thank you for being here to help us dedicate the marker. We encourage you to be a part of history wherever you find yourselves, and certainly to lend whatever support you'd like to lend to those efforts that will preserve history, even as this marker designates this historical place. So at this time, I'll ask Dean to take over, and are you ready to?
Oh, I am.
All right.
My visual aids and everything. No, I too thank you very much for coming. We had no idea how many are here. I did a quick count while he was talking, and I got up to somewhere about 50 or 60 maybe. And we're certainly glad you came and lend your support to this effort of honoring our ancestors. I've got a couple of things, just sort of housekeeping I wanted to tell you about. be sure and come over and sign your name in the black book or on the clipboard, either one. They're the same place, but get your name and address, email, phone number, and tell us what land cemetery family you're associated with.
Your tribal connection.
The tribal connection. Also, there's a little brochure over there that I made this, but it's nothing to brag about, but it gives a little history about the cemetery, how it came to be. But more important to us, on about page 3, it shows how you can donate. Right now, we're in pretty good shape financially. We got a CD worth about $3,400 and about $1,200 in the bank. But we do have some maintenance costs. Doyle does some of the volunteer mowing, but he may want to hire it done sometime, so we would have to do that occasionally. So it would help to get some contribution, and we'd like for you to do that. And the address is where you can send your money and where you make out the check and all that are on here. A couple other things. On this same little brochure is a list, to the best of my knowledge anyway, of all the family names that are buried here. And so you can see those on there and see if there's some of those that you didn't know were here maybe. I have an inventory that my brother, now deceased, he and I worked to get an inventory over two, 3 different times. And I have a copy of that. My name is in the little brochure here. And if you want that 10-page copy of exactly what is marked on all these cemetery gravestones, I'll be glad to send you that if you'll ship me $2 for postage stamp. Anyway, that's it on here. Also, a couple of years ago, I wrote about a 50-page biography of Nicholas Land. This guy we're kind of honoring here today. I'm like you get started talking, you don't know when to quit. I don't know how you historians know how thick your book is going to be.
We just don't use the book.
Oh, yeah. But anyway, he had a very interesting life, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. But if you want to see that thing, it's free. I'm not trying to sell it. I'll ship it to you by email. If you want to print it, you pay the printing cost. But I thought he had an interesting life, and I'd be glad to share that with you. Okay, let me just kind of give you a little quickie about how this cemetery came to be. Some of it is in the little brochure. But Nicholas Land married his 4th wife here in Texas. I can document that he married the first 3, but I don't know specifically what happened to them. We assume they died. He married a wife in a wife in Virginia. He had at least 2 children by that marriage. He moved to Missouri. He married another wife there. A couple of other kids. He supposedly went to the gold rush in the 1850s, came back to Texas, liked Travis County where he was, decided to stay here, married another woman here. About a year later, he married number 4, and she's buried right over there. Now, I can account for. I don't know what happened to the other 3. So anyway, they got married in Travis County. About a couple of years later, came up here and bought 500 acres for $6,000. $6,000 in 1866. Would you like to guess what that would be worth today? Well, a little bit of internet search will show you that it's somewhere in the $800,000 today. So he had a lot of money.
At a time when not many people in Texas had money, right, after the end of the Civil War.
The beginning of the Civil War, 1860.
Yeah, 60, yeah.
So anyway, he bought the land, though, and there's some other evidence I found just recently that she might have had some money as well. But that might have helped. His land is roughly in this shape. It's a big L shape, and the cemetery is down here in the toe. So we're right down here. And it started, part of the upper border right up here is where County Road 305 is now. And this part up here is almost 2 miles long from the base, which is right over there, up that way for about 2 miles. And this corner down here is almost certainly where they had their home, because I found a deed that said he designated 200 acres down in this corner as their homestead. So that would have designated, that said, well, we're living down here. And that was close to Salado Creek, so that's pretty obvious that they would try to build a house near a creek. And Salado Creek crosses the property up there and goes on up to the town of Salado. We're familiar with that up on I-35. So that's the story about the land. I'll get to that. They had 6 children, 13 by Nancy, 8 by Mary Lou, the second daughter. Nancy married George Rowe, as David said. Mary Lou married a man by the name of Rufus Shaver. I don't know much about the Shavers, but the Shavers had 8 children. 3 of those children died as children, and they're buried here. A 17-year-old boy, a 7-year-old son, and a baby girl about 1 year old. The third daughter, Belle, married a man by the name of Andrew Gillespie. She was only 16 when she got married, and she died 2 years later. What would you think she died from? Probably childbirth. Don't know, but she's buried. That's that little half-cracked cemetery, gravestone right there. That's Belle's grave. And then they had 3 boys, Carter and Hope and June. When she married Andrew Gillespie, when Belle married Andrew Gillespie, that was their first marriage into a Gillespie family. Carter came along and he married Annie Gillespie, who's a sister of Andrew that she married. And then June came along and married Cora Gillespie. So we had 3 Gillespie siblings marrying 3 Land siblings over a period of about 11 years. And he's a descendant of the very first daughter. I'm a descendant of the very last child, a son, June Land. June was born in June, and they named him June.
Pretty simple.
The other son I didn't mention was Hope Land. He was the next to last. He married Lucy McClanahan. They had 14 children. So 13 in his family, 8 with the Shavers, not any with Belle. I'm not sure about Carter. June had 9 children. My mother was the oldest. Hope had 14. 11 sons, 3 daughters. So if you know anybody in Texas named Land, or Gillespie, or Rowe, or Shaver,
you're related to.
You're probably related to. So they're there. Nick also, the older Nick also has a daughter. A sister married here. She's Frances Loving, just immediately to his grave there. And then he has 2 sons by previous marriages. These 2 right here. This is as odd near as I can find. This is the oldest grave in the cemetery. That one right there. And that's Nicholas's second son, who was born in Virginia. He died at about age 24. Of course, these 6 children grew up, married, began to have children. They began to move away. I know some moved out to Hockley County, out in the Panhandle, near Level Land. Some to McCulloch County, near Brady. Knox County at Knox City. Some to Oklahoma. Some down in the Corpus Christi area. So they scattered. By 1915, none of the original lands were here anymore. All this 500 acres was sold off to various people over several years. And you know, of course, about the German immigration into Texas in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And there were at least 3 German families we know of up in here. You know, most of them around Austin or Fredericksburg in that area. But the Langeneggers was one of those families. They bought about almost 200 acres down in that corner down there. And the Langenegger family still, descendants, still own a lot of that territory down there. Doyle and his cousin, where are you, Doyle? There you are. Doyle and his cousin live on part of this original 500. So, and the Langenegger family, y'all have been here 100 years, over 100 years. So, you just about have property rights, I think. So anyway, that's kind of a quickie. Let me